Have you ever wondered what consciousness is and how it connects us to everything around us? This is a profound question that has intrigued philosophers, scientists, and mystics for centuries. In today's video, we'll explore a fascinating parallel between Buddhism and the theory of non-local consciousness, to perspectives that, although they seem to come from completely different fields, offer a common view of the interconnected nature of existence. We will discover together what non-local consciousness means, who the proponents of this theory are, and how Buddhist principles intersect with modern research on the mind. From deep meditation to scientific discoveries, this video aims to open a window into a deeper understanding of ourselves and our relationship with the universe. So get ready to explore these fascinating concepts that not only challenge our thinking, but also invite us to reflect on our place in the cosmos. Let's get started. In recent years, the concept of non-local consciousness has begun to gain ground, challenging traditional paradigms about the nature of mind and its relationship to physical reality. Surprisingly, many of these innovative ideas are not new. They have been explored for millennia in various spiritual traditions, one of the best known being Buddhism. Buddhism is not only a religion, but also a set of practices and teachings about the nature of existence, mind and suffering. At the heart of his teachings is the concept of anatta, non-self, and the interdependence of all things. At its core, Buddhism asserts that there is no individual or permanent self, and that everything that exists is part of an interconnected web, a universal consciousness, or a collective reality. This view seems to have deep similarities with the idea of non-local consciousness. On the other hand, the theory of non-local consciousness comes from a modern direction, supported by some discoveries in quantum physics and neuroscience, which question the materialist view of consciousness as an exclusive product of brain activity. This theory suggests that the mind is not limited to the individual's brain and body, but can interact with the world beyond physical boundaries, having a timeless and interconnected nature, very similar to interdependence in Buddhism. As we begin to unravel the concept of non-local consciousness, it is essential to deepen our understanding of this fascinating theory and see how it interconnects with the Buddhist view of reality. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far and want to explore more exciting topics about consciousness, spirituality, and science, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now let's turn our attention to the theory of non-local consciousness, what it is, what are its fundamental principles, and who are the proponents of this theory. Non-local consciousness is a concept that suggests that the human mind is not limited by space and time, but has the ability to exist and interact beyond the physical body and the conventional boundaries of reality, in contrast to the traditional view of modern science, which considers the mind to be a product of neural activity in the brain. The theory of non-local consciousness states that the mind is not prisoned in the human body, but is distributed and interconnected with the rest of the universe. This concept developed based on phenomena in quantum physics and research on extrasensory perception, near-death experiences, and other unusual consciousness-related experiences. For example, in quantum physics, there is a phenomenon called quantum inseparability entanglement, whereby subatomic particles remain connected and can influence each other instantaneously, regardless of the distance between them. Some researchers have suggested that consciousness might function similarly, transcending the boundaries of space and time. The theory of non-local consciousness has been advocated by various figures such as Dr. Larry Dossey, a physician and author who popularized this theory through his works on the connection between spirituality and health. Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist who collaborated with anesthetist Stuart Hameroff to develop the all-core theory, arguing that quantum processes in neuronal microtubules may play an important role in consciousness. People who have had near-death experiences often report the sensation of leaving their body and perceiving things around them, sometimes in places far from their physical body. These experiences suggest the possibility of a form of consciousness that is not confined to the body. There are numerous studies and anecdotes about people who have accessed information about events or locations without being physically present there, which could support the idea that the mind can work at a distance. Deep meditation and expanded states of consciousness. In spiritual traditions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism, there are practices aimed at transcending the limits of the individual mind and connecting to a universal consciousness. These practices have been described by their followers as methods of accessing higher levels of consciousness. The theory of non-local consciousness raises fascinating questions about the nature of reality and the limits of human perception. Is it possible that the mind is not just a product of the brain, but a fundamental force, interconnected with all that exists? This is a question that many researchers in fields such as neuroscience and physics are currently exploring. In parallel, the Buddhist concept of universal consciousness, the idea that there is no individual self and that we are all connected at a deep level, provides a spiritual framework for understanding this interconnectedness. Buddhism, one of the oldest spiritual traditions, offers profound insight into the nature of consciousness, suggesting that the mind is not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a universal interconnectedness. In this section, we will explore how the fundamental Buddhist ideas of anatta, non-self, and interdependence resemble modern concepts of non-local consciousness. In Buddhism, one of the three fundamental characteristics of existence is anatta, meaning the absence of a permanent or individual self. According to this doctrine, what we consider to be I, actually a collection of transitory phenomena, thoughts, sensations, and perceptions that have no independent existence. This implies the idea that there is no separate, fixed entity that represents the self, which resonates with the theory of non-local consciousness, which holds that the mind is not confined to a body or physical location. This view of the self in Buddhism is profoundly different from Western views, which emphasize individuality and the ego. Anatta suggests that our mind does not exist independently of the reality around us, but is constantly shaped and influenced by all other phenomena. Everything we experience is the result of a network of interrelated causalities and conditions, which paves the way for an understanding of consciousness as a collective and dynamic phenomenon, not an isolated one. Another central tenet of Buddhism is interdependence, which holds that everything in the universe exists in a state of interconnectedness and interdependence. Nothing exists independently. Every phenomenon arises from a chain of causes and conditions that support it. In this light, individual consciousness is seen as an integral part of universal consciousness. Buddhism suggests that our mind is intrinsically connected to the surrounding reality, and that the barriers between self and other are illusory. For example, the concept of Tathagatagarbha, also known as Buddha nature in the Mobbiyina tradition, states that all individuals possess the potential for enlightenment, being fundamentally connected to a universal consciousness that transcends the individual self. This view of interconnectedness is strikingly similar to the concept of non-local consciousness. If all minds are part of one universal consciousness, then the separation between individuals and the rest of the universe becomes an illusion, just as the theory of non-locality in quantum physics holds that particles interact at a distance. Buddhism teaches us that our minds are not completely separate, but exist in a subtle web of connections. One of the fundamental goals of Buddhist practice is the attainment of enlightenment or nirvana, a state of pure consciousness in which the illusions of ego and separateness disappear. In the state of enlightenment, one understands that everything is interconnected and that there are no real distinctions between oneself and the rest of the world. This profound realization reflects the idea of non-local consciousness. Enlightenment can be seen as an awareness that our mind is part of a universal consciousness that is not limited by the boundaries of the physical body. Meditation, one of the main Buddhist practices, is often considered a direct path to this understanding. Through meditation, individuals are encouraged to quiet their minds and overcome attachments to their individual selves. In moments of deep meditation, many practitioners report a state of expanded consciousness, or a sense of oneness with all that exists, experiences that are very similar to descriptions of non-local consciousness. The Buddhist concept of universal consciousness and the theory of non-local consciousness share the idea that the mind is not limited to an individual or a specific space. Both suggest that there is a deep interconnectedness between all forms of consciousness and that our perception of separation is largely an illusion. In Buddhism, this understanding is the key to enlightenment, and in modern theories of consciousness, it can open up new insights into the nature of mind and reality. As the idea of non-local consciousness gained popularity, it was adopted and explored by a number of researchers, scientists and thinkers in fields ranging from medicine to quantum physics. In this section, we will look at some of the leading proponents of this theory and their contributions, showing how these contemporary perspectives echo ancient ideas in Buddhism. One of the most vocal proponents of the non-local consciousness theory is Dr. Larry Darcy, an American physician who has devoted much of his career to exploring the connections between health, spirituality, and consciousness. Darcy popularized the concept in the medical and spiritual community, arguing that the mind is not confined to the physical body and that there is strong evidence, both scientific and empirical, that the human mind has the ability to act beyond physical boundaries. In his works such as One Mind, How Our Individual Mind is Part of a Greater Consciousness and Why It Matters, Darcy suggests that all minds are interconnected and part of a unified mind that transcends individuality. He cites examples from research on remote prayer, unexplained healings, and near-death experiences that demonstrate the non-local potential of consciousness. Darcy not only sees this theory as a more holistic approach to health and healing, but also sees it as a bridge between science and spirituality, bringing together concepts from quantum physics with teachings from ancient spiritual traditions such as Buddhism. Another significant contribution to the understanding of non-local consciousness comes from the field of quantum physics and neuroscience. Roger Penrose, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and Stuart Hameroff, an esthetist and neuroscientist, jointly developed the orchestrated objective reduction theory. According to this theory, quantum processes occurring in neuronal microtubules play an essential role in the generation of consciousness. This theory suggests that consciousness could be linked to non-local quantum phenomena, which would allow the mind to transcend the physical boundaries of the body. Penrose and Hameroff advanced the hypothesis that states of consciousness can be influenced by quantum phenomena that exist beyond time and space, implying a form of universal interconnection of minds. Although their theory is controversial and not widely accepted, it remains one of the few attempts in science to connect quantum mechanics with the nature of consciousness. Another proponent of non-local consciousness is Ervin Laszlo, a philosopher and systems theorist who proposed the idea of the Akashic field, a concept inspired by Eastern spiritual traditions such as Hinduism and Buddhism, which suggests that there is a field of cosmic information that connects all beings and phenomena. Laszlo sees this field as a form of universal consciousness in which all minds and events are interconnected. In his works, Laszlo explains that the Akashic field functions as a network of cosmic information, similar to the concept of non-locality in quantum physics, where events and minds are not isolated, but are all connected by a common consciousness. Laszlo argues that this field of information can be accessed through expanded states of consciousness, allowing us to better understand the interconnected nature of reality. In addition to scientific researchers, there are numerous spiritual and mystical leaders who have advocated similar ideas of non-local consciousness throughout time. For example, in the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, mystics who practice deep meditation have reported experiences of coming out of self and union with all that exists. Descriptions that resonate with the idea of a universal consciousness. Adherents of non-local consciousness theories share views similar to Buddhist concepts of non-self and interconnectedness, the idea that the mind is not confined to the body and can transcend the boundaries of Individuality is echoed in both modern physics and ancient spiritual teachings, just as Buddhism holds that everything is connected by a web of causality and conditions. Adherents of non-local consciousness assert that our minds are all interconnected and that there is a collective reality beyond what we perceive with our physical senses. To better understand how the idea of non-local consciousness resonates with spiritual traditions such as Buddhism, it is essential to look at the main proponents of this theory and how they contributed to its development. From doctors and physicists to philosophers and mystics, they extended the research into consciousness beyond the boundaries of the body and time, demonstrating that the mind could be interconnected on a deep level with all that exists. As we understand the concepts, we see how each of these thinkers, from Larry Dossey to Roger Penrose, have created bridges between science and spirituality, similar to how Buddhism explores the interdependence and nature of the self. At this point, it becomes apparent that there is a convergence between these two seemingly different perspectives. Now, we will go a step further and explore in detail the points of interference between Buddhism and the theory of non-local consciousness, revealing how each complements and enriches the understanding of the other. In this section, we will explore how concepts from Buddhism and non-local consciousness theory converge and influence each other. We will look at the key points where these two perspectives intersect and how each can contribute to a deeper understanding of the nature of mind and reality. One of the central points of interference is the idea that the mind is not limited to the physical body. In Buddhism, deep meditation and enlightenment are seen as methods of transcending the illusion of the individual self and experiencing a form of expanded consciousness, interconnected with all that exists. Likewise, the theory of non-local consciousness suggests that the mind is not strictly a product of the brain, but a force that can interact with the world beyond space and time. A concrete example is the experience of samadhi in Buddhism, a state of deep consciousness in which the practitioner feels oneness with the universe and complete loss of ego. This resembles the experiences reported by proponents of non-local consciousness, who describe the feeling of being connected to a vast field of consciousness without physical boundaries. The Buddhist concept of anatta, or non-self, is another area of strong parallelism. Buddhism teaches that what we think of as our individual self is actually an illusion composed of a series of fleeting experiences, thoughts, emotions, and perceptions that come and go. Adherents of non-local consciousness hold similar ideas, stating that our individuality is only a limited perception and that in fact our consciousness is part of a much larger web of universal consciousness. In Buddhism, overcoming the illusion of self is the key to nirvana, the state of liberation and deep awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. In non-local consciousness theory, letting go of the limited perception of the mind as separate from the rest of the universe can lead to a deeper understanding of reality and even new forms of knowledge. Another point of interference is the Buddhist principle of interdependence, pratityasamutpā, which states that all things are linked in a causal network of relationships and conditions. Nothing exists in isolation, and everything we experience is the result of universal interconnectedness. This Buddhist concept resonates strongly with the notion of quantum inseparability in modern physics, which suggests that subatomic particles can remain connected, influencing each other instantaneously, regardless of distance. The theory of non-local consciousness expands on this idea, suggesting that our minds are similarly interconnected, a form of inseparability of consciousness, where each individual is part of a larger field of universal consciousness. In Buddhism, this idea is reflected in the notion that our mind is not separate from the rest of the world, but part of an interdependent network. Meditation, a central practice in Buddhism, is often considered a way to access expanded states of consciousness, where the barriers between the self and the outside world disappear. During deep meditation, practitioners can experience a sense of oneness with the universe, a state that transcends the limitations of ordinary consciousness. This type of experience is similar to what advocates of non-local consciousness, who argue that the mind can operate beyond space and time. Near-death experiences, extrasensory perception, and remote prayer are examples that suggest the human mind has the ability to interact with the world beyond the physical body. Similarly, in meditation, the mind opens to interconnected reality, eliminating the perception of separation. Both Buddhism and the theory of non-local consciousness suggest that ego and attachment to individuality are barriers to a deeper understanding of reality. In Buddhism, non-attachment is essential to attaining enlightenment. By freeing oneself from the desires and illusions of the individual self, the practitioner can reach a state of inner peace and awareness of oneness with all that exists. Non-local consciousness also proposes the idea that when we let go of ego perception and open ourselves to interconnectedness, we can access a higher level of consciousness. This transcendence of the ego allows the mind to expand and interact with reality in a way that goes beyond the limits of ordinary experience. By analyzing the points of interference between Buddhism and non-local consciousness, it is evident that both views of mind and reality are moving towards a common conclusion. The separation between self and world is illusory. Both suggest that our mind is part of an interconnected consciousness that transcends the boundaries of space and time. While Buddhism explores these ideas through spiritual practices and meditation, followers of non-local consciousness use modern scientific insights to understand how the mind can function beyond physical boundaries. This convergence between science and spirituality opens up a series of fascinating questions. Is it possible that our mind is more than a product of the physical brain? How can we use meditation and other techniques to access this non-local consciousness? These questions will continue to challenge and inspire research in both fields, providing new insights into the nature of reality and consciousness. As we have explored the points of interference between Buddhism and non-local consciousness theory, it becomes clear that both systems of thought have a convergent view of the nature of consciousness and reality. The Buddhist tradition, deeply rooted in exploring the interdependence and illusory nature of the self, meets modern theories of non-local consciousness that suggest the mind can operate beyond space and time. This parallel opens up a number of new perspectives on consciousness and invites us to reflect on fundamental questions about who we are and what the nature of reality is. Next, we will synthesize the main ideas that link the two perspectives and explore how these theories can provide new ways of understanding human consciousness. In particular, we will reflect on some of the key ideas discussed earlier: the interconnectedness of consciousness, the transcendence of the ego, and the notion of non-dual reality. Both non-local consciousness theory and Buddhism suggest that our individual existence is only one facet of a larger, interconnected consciousness. Buddhism holds that all phenomena are conditioned and interdependent, and our consciousness is part of this vast network of causal relationships. On the other hand, modern research on non-local consciousness, supported by proponents such as Larry Dossey or Ervin Laszlo, suggests that the mind can transcend the body and that there is some form of interconnection of all minds. On the other hand, Buddhist practices such as meditation can provide practical methods for accessing expanded states of consciousness, thus supporting ideas of non-locality. Meditation becomes a tool that allows us to directly experience the interconnectedness that both Buddhism and theories of non-local consciousness speak of. Modern scientific ideas can also bring greater clarity to spiritual phenomena, providing a theoretical framework for understanding the mystical experiences and expanded states of consciousness that Buddhism has explored for thousands of years. For example, research into quantum physics and quantum inseparability may provide a scientific explanation for the interconnectedness of consciousness described in Buddhism. Thus, as science and spirituality continue to converge, it will become possible to develop new understandings of the nature of reality and how consciousness influences the world. Rather than being two separate fields, science and spirituality can work together to answer fundamental questions about existence. Thus, this meeting between Buddhism and the theory of non-local consciousness is not only an exploration of the past or the present, but also an opening to new ways of thinking about the future of humanity and our place in the universe. From meditation to quantum physics, from spiritual introspection to scientific research, growing evidence suggests that our minds and reality itself are far more interconnected than we might have imagined. Having explored the points of interference between Buddhism and the theory of non-local consciousness, it is important to see how meditation, one of the most fundamental practices of Buddhism, can play a key role in accessing and understanding these expanded states of consciousness. Next, we will look at the implications that meditative practices have on the mind and how they can provide a window into non-local consciousness. In the Buddhist tradition, meditation is a method by which the mind can transcend the limitations imposed by sensory perceptions and the ego. By practicing mindfulness or deep concentration meditation samadhi, the individual can experience a sense of oneness with all of existence, similar to the ideas promoted by the theory of non-local consciousness. Practitioners of meditation often describe feeling that the ego disappears and their consciousness expands beyond the physical boundaries of the body. This experience is comparable to the non-locality theory of consciousness, which holds that the human mind is not limited by space and time and can interact with other forms of consciousness or with information in the universe at subtle levels. Through meditation, it becomes possible for the individual to access such states of consciousness and realize that the separation between self and the external world is an illusion. Buddhist meditation has been used for thousands of years to access states of expanded consciousness called jhanas, states of deep concentration, or even nirvana, a state in which the illusion of self disappears completely. Similarly, experiences described by proponents of non-local consciousness, such as near-death experiences or mystical experiences, provide a framework in which consciousness appears to operate independently of the body and the boundaries of space and time. These mystical experiences suggest that there are ways to access deeper dimensions of reality, and meditation can be one of the most powerful ways to reach these levels. They also point to a deep interconnectedness between all beings, similar to Buddhist principles of interdependence and the illusory nature of the self. Increasingly, modern studies in neuroscience and psychology suggest that meditation can have profound effects on the human brain and consciousness. Recent research has shown that deep meditation can change the structure of the brain and induce altered states of consciousness that resemble descriptions of non-local experiences. At the same time, this research suggests that meditation practices not only help the individual access expanded states of consciousness, but also enhance their ability to experience compassion, interconnectedness, and a better understanding of the nature of reality. These modern discoveries contribute to a broader integration of the spiritual wisdom of Buddhism and contemporary theories of mind and consciousness. So Buddhism and the theory of non-local consciousness show us that both traditions, spiritual and scientific, share a common view of the nature of mind and reality. They suggest that human consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of individuality or space and time, but is part of a vast and interconnected network. On the one hand, Buddhism offers us a set of practices and principles through which we can experience this interconnectedness at a deep level through meditation and liberation from the illusion of the ego. On the other hand, the theory of non-local consciousness, supported by recent scientific research, provides us with a theoretical framework to understand how the human mind can function beyond the limits imposed by physical reality. Finally, this video invites us to reflect on an essential aspect. The separation between science and spirituality is becoming thinner. As we continue to explore the mysteries of consciousness, we may discover that science and spirituality are to complementary facets of the same reality, a reality in which the human mind plays a central role, beyond time, space, and the limits of ordinary perception. Our consciousness may be the key to a deep understanding of the universe. How will we use this potential to transform the way we think about ourselves and the world we live in? This is our challenge and our opportunity. In conclusion, our journey through the parallel between Buddhism and non-local consciousness theory has led us to a deeper understanding of the nature of consciousness and the interconnectedness of the universe. I discovered how these two perspectives, although coming from different fields, come together in the idea that the human mind transcends the physical limits of the body and is an integral part of a universal web of consciousness. As we continue to explore these concepts, let us remember that each of us has the power to access these expanded states of consciousness through meditation, reflection, and openness to mystical experiences. So let's ask, what would it mean to connect with this non-local consciousness? How might these insights transform not only our personal lives, but also the society in which we live? In an increasingly interconnected world, the answers to these questions can provide not only a deeper understanding of reality, but also a framework for cultivating compassion and empathy in our relationships with others. Thank you for joining us in this exploration. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What topics would you like us to explore next? Until next time, let's stay curious and open to the mysteries of consciousness and the universe.